Welcome back, Top Fivers, to another episode. Today, we're talking about the state of the music industry, what we see, what we like, what we don't like, and just overall what we see happening in the next few years and the new bands we are looking at too, and the old bands we're still remembering. Welcome, of course, our beautiful co-host, Shauna Sneeden.
Hello.
And we're going to turn just a minute over her for some news in the music world.
Yes, we're going to talk just a little bit about what last weekend. Jan Wenner was interviewed by New York Times newspaper, and he made some disparaging comments about women in music as well as people of color. And when that happened, because he is chairman of the board of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he upset a lot of people. And it took 16 minutes for, no, scratch that. It's 20 minutes. It took 20 minutes for the 16-member panel to kick him out. He's done. He's done. And so he hasn't been the editor for Rolling Stone magazine for a long time. But even though he was and co-founder of the magazine, it kind of wielded him some power, and he has been known to boast about what power he was wielding. And so when we were talking about, why are these people not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? That's probably why. And like Jethro Tull, they haven't been inducted or even nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it's
right.
Because Jan Wenner has a bee in his bonnet about Jethro Tull. I don't know why. I don't care. But they deserve to be there. So now hopefully, because think about it. Jethro Tull has always been very innovative and cool as far as prog rock is concerned.
Sure.
They made it okay for the flute to be in rock. Ask Lizzo.
Right. Yes.
And so, but anyhow, people are speculating that now that he's going to be gone and he's no longer chairman, is not even on the board anymore. People are speculating that we're going to start seeing some of those bands that have well deserved to be there long ago. So cool. I usually don't experience Schadenfreude hardly at all, but in this case, Jan Wenner, your comeuppance has come, honey.
And what were you talking earlier about Farm Aid?
Okay, Farm Aid happened this weekend, and I need to see video. I'm sure out of the thousands of people that were there, recorded it and slapped it up on YouTube. So I'm going to have to do some research. But Bob Dylan graced the stage of Farm Aid this weekend, and it was a surprise. This, kind of was an unslated thing. He came up on stage, and he brought with him the remaining members of the Heartbreakers. So Steve Ferrone, Mike Campbell, and Ben Tench. I can't wait to see the video. It's got to be fabulous.
Well, that will be interesting, and it's nice. It's a nice, for friends of the Traveling Wilburys, fans of the Traveling Wilburys, and knowing that Dylan and Petty worked so hard together, the fact that he could bring the Heartbreakers into that scene that's just fantastic.
Absolutely. That's going to be another, historic moment in rock that people are going to want to talk about.
It's what's interesting about the Traveling Wilburys, going back, all those years now since they were a band, of course, was from one hit to another hit. They of course lost Roy Orbison in that transition.
Yeah, from volume 1 to volume 3.
Exactly, and it, as obviously Roy wasn't a young man, but to lose that and lost some of the.
He was in his 50s.
Yeah, he wasn't old, but rock and roll age, he was pretty old. He'd gone through a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that, so it wasn't a huge shock necessarily that he passed, but it was sad. And then not too long after that to lose George and several, I think most of that band is now deceased, if I remember correctly.
Well, we lost Tom Petty.
Right.
We lost George, we lost Roy. And Jeff Lynne is still around. And who was another distinctive voice in that? But yeah, most of that band is no longer with us.
And it's sad because the Traveling Wilburys brought together. I was never a huge Roy Orbison fan, but I loved him in the Traveling Wilburys. You know.
This is volume 1 and 3. There was no volume 2.
So it was so there's some things. To go back to what you were first talking about.
Yeah,
with
Bob Dylan
Jethro.
is there too. So
Yeah.
we have there's the guys right there, and we've lost 3 of the 5.
And to go back to what you're talking about earlier with Jethro Tull not being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Jethro Tull, in my opinion, does need to belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I can't stand listening to Jethro Tull. They're not one of my. That's not something I care to delve into. Their biggest hit song, whatever I consider the one I've heard the most, and I can't even tell you the name of it because I never have cared to learn that.
Aqualung?
Drives me up the wall. Huh?
Aqualung?
Yes, thank you. Yes, Aqualung. Drives me crazy.
I love them. I love them.
It gets stuck in my head, and I hate that.
That's why they belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because
that's why they belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yes, and you are completely correct. Innovators, yes, they did make the flute accessible to rock and roll. Them and Led Zeppelin, I'll give throw a little bit the lead there, but they deserve their place. It's missing the Rock Hall is missing all kinds of pieces and chunks of history that they should have in them. What's that?
Alan Parsons.
Alan, there's no lack of naming, who should be in there.
Alan Parsons is egregious. It is egregious that he's out of there, not only because of his band, but because of his production work on one of the top selling albums of all time, which was Pink Floyd's
Dark Side of the Moon.
Dark Side of the Moon. Yeah.
Right.
And he was a child. He was literally a kid when he
17, I think he was. Yeah.
Yeah, he was very young, and we do have producers in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We do. We have our Berry Gordy. We have Quincy Jones. They've all been inducted. Guys, where is Alan Parsons?
So, hopefully it's wishful thinking, I think, but hopefully they do start including some people that need to be in there. I truly hope that is a thing that starts happening. They're not going to do anything though that stops whatever money they have coming in from coming in.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
Have we talked about the new? Let's see. So in October 20th. So we are looking at 28 days. We are going to see a brand new Rolling Stones album. I can't stop talking about it.
Yay!
Because it's called Hackney Diamonds. It's all going to be brand new. 2 of the albums they recorded in 2019. That means that Charlie Watts was included. And one of those songs, Living by the Sword, was Bill Wyman is on there. And so you've got the original rhythm section lineup of the Rolling Stones on this album, at least for one track, which is going to be historic. Historic. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to hear it. They have a song on there called Sweet Sounds of Heaven, featuring Lady Gaga and Stevie Wonder on the keyboards. Are you kidding me?
That's pretty cool.
Oh!
That's pretty cool.
And I love the single. The single that they released is called Angry. I love it. It's amazing. Start Me Up. It's got some familiarity with that song a little bit, but it stands apart on its own. It's a great divorce song if you want to get real.
Well, that's funny. Well, so this brings us to the next little news segment we've been given a try, Top 5 Pop 5. And when we actually get some production value to this show, it'll actually be cooler. But when Rashana triggered Rolling Stones, I'm going to put her on the spot and have her name her top 5 Rolling Stone songs of all time.
I've thought about this, and my number one by far and away is She's a Rainbow. And that's just for personal reasons, because it involves a memory of my teeny tiny little girl. I was playing the song, or the radio was playing the song, as she had this cute little nightgown and she was just dancing and spinning around, and it was just the most precious thing. And I cannot listen to that song without that imagery popping into my head. But I would have to say that Shattered is on that list. She's so
Sure.
cool. Can't You Hear Me Knocking, of course.
Great song.
Oh, let's see. I want to say Waiting on a Friend, and then I'm gonna
Beautiful song.
slide in another. And Waiting on a Friend is one of my favorites. But again, I have this memory, and from a personal experience, where I visited the building that video was shot. That building, coincidentally, was also featured on Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti album. Except they had to crop out one of the floors to make it fit the 12 by 12.
Sure.
But that video was shot there. It starts with Mick on the stoop. And that is on St. Mark Street in New York City. And I was there a year ago this month, and I saw the building, saw the stoop, and my friend and I walked down to the corner where the bar was, or that little cool restaurant / bar was, that is featured in the film, and it's still there. We went in, had a bevy, had a nice little appetizer, and just sat in the atmosphere that is, was permeated by the Stones. And then I want to say Sympathy for the Devil. It's a great song. I like it. I'm a little partial to it because it was on Beggar's Banquet, that was released in 1968, same year that you and I were both released.
Yes, we were.
The world. So
I think we're much
go.
bigger hits, though.
There's my list.
Well, as we've mentioned in the past, "Sympathy for the Devil" is one of the best rock and roll songs ever written, and it still to this day gives me the creeps every time I hear it. I don't listen to it because I just don't like the subject matter of it, but it is a masterpiece as far as the songwriting goes. It is a fantastic song. If I was to add any interjection there for songs, I would like to, in my top 5 for them, it would be Painted Black. I love Painted Black.
Yeah.
So that song, and Mother's Little Helper, for whatever reason, that song just gets my fingers snapping, so
love it.
Yeah, but
well,
it's I and you know this about me, I'm a much prefer old Rolling Stones to new Rolling Stones.
Sure.
And they had some great songs that have come out, but that attitude they had when they were still young and full of piss and vinegar at the time, when they're just hitting that scene, being rock and roll, that was awesome. They became such a legacy that I think they lost some of that swagger that they still have. I mean, they hit that stage, they command everything, but I really prefer old Rolling Stones to anything else.
Yeah. Well, I do say, like, Bridges to Babylon has a few tracks on there that really kind of brings the grit that you're talking about. A Bigger Bang, same thing. There's a few songs on there that bring that grit. And which brings me back around to Hackney Diamonds. This is going to be really cool because the one that they did release, Angry, has got some of that grit on it, and I love it. I mean, these guys are, Mick is the octogenarian now that we've lost Charlie.
Right.
But Keith is quick behind. He's gonna turn 80 on December 20th. It's the same day as his wedding anniversary, by the way. Which I think is cool. It's so cool. But
easy for him to remember.
And that, well, and if you're Keith Richards, you kind of, you might need some help. But and then Ronnie Wood is only 76. But still, I mean, we're looking at 6 decades that these guys have been around and have still been bringing the grit to rock and roll, and I love that. They're one of my favorites. I learned this weekend that a dear friend of mine is not a Rolling Stones fan, never has been, and so now I'm questioning my taste.
So to finish that off, that subject, with their grit and their swagger, their number one song for me, and far and away by far their number one song for me, is Honky Tonk Woman. That
That's
song,
a fantastic jam.
oh my gosh, that song gets me fired up every time I hear it. So, and that's what music really is, right? That thing that just gets into you and gets you moving, gets you,
Yeah.
humming, gets you whatever. That's really what gets me today. And the interesting thing about, we're talking about the state of music today, is that here's it's the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Most fans of the Rolling Stones couldn't name their last 3 albums, 4 albums, or 5 albums. They wouldn't have an idea. And they've consistently been putting on a album every 6 years, something like that, 7 years,
Well,
whatever.
except for Hackney Diamonds. This has been the longest span of them not releasing new music. It's actually been 18 years since they have released new music. Their last one, A Bigger Bang, came out in 2005.
Gotcha. All right. So, and once again, this goes to show that, so how much I was paying attention. But for example, I'll give you another example. I guess where I'm going with this, Def Leppard has had one album remake, which is what they've done with their Symphony, which is the new Hysteria album, which is really interesting.
Huh.
It is a good album. They're putting the whole symphony behind him, and putting a new take on these songs that everybody knows. But there's their album before that came out a year ago, Diamond Star Halo, is a phenomenal Def Leppard album.
Yeah.
But in this music world of, what have you done for me in the last 5 minutes? You just don't hear about it anymore. You don't get the record company production behind it anymore. You don't bring up to pay, if you blink, you might have missed it.
Yeah.
But they come out with some fantastic songs in the last 5 years. They've came out with some very good music, and most Def Leppard fans, just, it's not put in front of us anymore. We don't have our
No.
MTV, or we don't have a radio station that's just rock, that just
breaking
plays
rock, right?
Exactly.
Right. And there's so much digital stuff happening, and so many different formats where it kind of gets lost in the shuffle because there's just so much. There's YouTube, and then the TikTok, and all of these other outlets. How we don't have, like you said, our MTV that is like, oh, world breaking news, here's this.
Right. And I think the other thing we're missing is producers. We now have, so many of these bands are doing their own production, which is fine, producing themselves. But those bands the people out there who are still producing some of these younger bands, and you can produce them to make money and sound like everybody else, or you could produce them to possibly be the next big thing, or you might miss. And I think so many of them aren't willing to take that chance anymore. We'd rather go the safe bet and put something out there. Sounds like everybody else, but it's, at least they'll get played.
Yeah.
And that drives me crazy too.
Well, and it's hard. I mean, because there's a band out there. They won that Eurovision a couple of years ago. I think it's pronounced Måneskin or Måneskin. Fantastic band. They've got a unique sound. It's fresh. I like them a lot. When my friend came to visit me this year, we were sitting down and talking about this very subject. Like, okay, who is new in rock? Because I can't find anybody that just really grabs me in like that. So, and I knew from, just kind of, I don't even know how I stumbled onto, it was on the radio, and they had done a cover. And I was like, oh, I know, let's listen to this band. And so we pulled up some of their videos and stuff and was listening to it. And now she's like a huge fan. But it's hard. I mean, you have to kind of dig for it.
Sure. Well, when's the last time we really had somebody jump across the pond that really, smacked us, there may be somebody more recently, but Adele is pretty much the last person I could think that made that big switch from
Yeah.
British Europeans the side of things to here. And it's unfortunate the way we kind of set things up, because there are some bands in Europe that are huge in Europe and they're
Yeah.
fantastic,
Uh-huh.
but we never hear about them here,
Yeah. And just
you
like the
know?
band that I just mentioned, Måneskin,
Yeah,
the Struts. The Struts are incredible. They're a young-ish band. They've been around 10 years. And in the
right.
scheme of things, I mean, when you've only got one decade compared to the Stones that have six, I mean, they're still a young band in their
Sure.
lineup. But and they're fantastic. I've seen them 3 times live because I just, I love them. They've got a great sound that I can connect with.
Well, and that's what it is, and we're not given that opportunity necessarily to connect. You really have to go looking nowadays
Yeah.
to find something new. And we one of our big one of our big shared complaints in new music is every now and then you'll find somebody that is amazing,
Hmm.
Greta Van Fleet,
Yes.
and they will wow you and awe you, and then they will forget what they what their sound was supposed to be. And I told myself to mute my cell phone before I started it. Yeah, I
It's hot.
remembered. Anyways, the thing that you liked the most about them, what they immediately did is went out and changed it. And
Yeah.
this band, in like I said, the rock world, when that band came out, when Greta Van Fleet came out, they were everywhere. Everybody wanted them on there. Nikki Sixx had the guitarist on his show.
Yeah.
I mean, because they had such that innovative sound that the rock
Yeah.
world was starving for,
Yeah.
and they just fumbled the ball. And
Well, and was it them or was it production? You know,
oh, I'm sure it was lots of different influences. I'm sure mom and dad's had some input there. And I think they thought their sound lended more to the 70s, and they probably love and worship the 70s artists that their parents had exposed them to, and then
yeah.
they grew up listening to themselves, which is fantastic. But most of us, for the most part, us our age, rejected the 70s scene. We don't want to see the perms or the long hairs or the bangles or the glitters or or the sequins. Or that's we don't. I'm not a big fan of spacey lyrics and things like that. That's not the part of the 70s that I always
That's why
remember.
you can't connect with David Bowie.
Well, there is a huge part of that, yes. But David Bowie knew how to come out with a good rockin' little tune too.
Yes, he did.
But yeah, but the whole Ziggy Stardust idea behind that, not my thing. You
I
know.
loved it.
But there are so many young bands, I'll call them, as you mentioned, that've been around for at least 2 or 3 albums now, and the cream always rises to the top. Which is like I always say, bands get the attention that they deserve,
Uh-huh.
but nothing more. For example, fantastic band. I would like to see them go back to punching people in the mouth with their riffs and with their attitude. But they fantastic band. They've had their success in the last few years.
Hmm.
Step back a little bit before then, and you have like bands like Hailstorm.
Yeah.
Tremendous young innovators for what we were asking them to do. Come out, hit us with something that we could get behind.
Yeah.
Shock us a little bit. They're Lizzie Hale. What an amazing singer! What a great
I
little
know, right.
band. With her brother and her friend. They're tremendous.
Yeah.
Um, but like to see them maybe not quite try so hard to be. You can't fake being rock and roll, right? You you either
Right.
are or you're not. And
Right.
it's be nice to see them. Nice to see them. Um, Realize they don't have to try. They are who they are. They don't have to try.
Yeah.
They don't have try to be extra sleazy or extra scandalous or extra skanky or whatever. They can just be them, and people will
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
You know. Um, so
Another
that
good another band that has, and you've mentioned them before, Rival Sons.
Oh yes.
Rival Sons, amazing.
Well, and they're old enough that it looks like they got discovered like 15 years later than they should have.
Yeah.
They all look a little bit older than the young bands out there right now. But
Right.
what an amazing sound. And they, they're carrying, they have a good fusion of their sound versus older 80s, even older 70s guitar sounds where the guitar had to be up front and
Hmm.
a hook that would just, punch you in the teeth or whatever like that. They are
Hmm.
an amazing band.
Yeah.
And they make a very simple song sound huge, and I
Uh,
love that about them.
yeah. Really thick.
Yes.
They have a
Yes.
thick sound. I love that.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, I mean, there's so many little bands that talk about, like, so one band that's been in the spotlight the last few years is Fever 333, and their first single, Made in America. I loved the angsty, um, Rage Against the Machine kind of feel that it had, you know. Um, but they're a band who plays the tracks. You see them on a stage and they're playing the tracks. They didn't have a bass player for like 6 to 8 months or something like that, but still doing their shows and stuff because everything they do is laid down on a track. And that's without getting into that whole Eddie Trunk hating tracks thing. Um, there's 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 something very disingenuous about a rock band that's not actually a rock band, you
Right.
know. And so but not to specifically hate on them, because it's happening across the board, with bands putting in a track to help their sound or sound younger or help with their vocals or whatever like that in a live performance. And you know we don't see bands live as much as we'd like to, except for maybe you. But but uh you if you- the ultimate, if you're going to hear this band, if it's all going to be production and you can't recreate it on stage, then you might as well have a computer do it.
Right.
you know
Right. And that's the
so
shame. Because where's the talent in that? I mean,
yes, exactly. Exactly. And I did this weekend, we did this little search online. My son Hunter was talking about it. And AI is made they're using all kinds of music with AI. It is interesting and not interesting. I saw a thing last week that some record label has signed an AI artist, so which is even weirder, to me. Um, but one thing that made me laugh is from SpongeBob, that little character Plankton. If you remember Plankton, that little
yeah.
guy, somebody has used AI for him, Plankton, to cover Adele's "Rolling in the Deep," and it is hysterical.
Oh,
So
funny.
you just look that one up, look that one up.
I'll
But
check it out.
that's what we're running the risk of right now is losing the freedom that rock and roll and music gives you as a whole, because we're willing to package it and produce it and literally just spit it out. Music, the rock bands of the 60s came about because of the era of the 60s,
And
the
what was
fight
happening?
for civil rights, the
Yeah.
fight for equality, and protesting against war, and if we're just, having AI do it, or just slapping, this production type value stuff on it that isn't giving us this, if it's not coming from a real source, what do we really have?
Right. 100%. So, so is that what, so if you were to ask for one thing that you want to see for the music and rock and roll as a whole, like in the future, is that what it would be?
I think what I would like to see is bands utilizing their guitars as a voice in their music. The music, regardless of the band, the music has always been what pushes. And a great example of this would be Rush. It took me years to like Geddy Lee singing. It took me years because his voice to me is not exactly pleasant. but
Oh,
the power of his voice mixed with the message of the music behind it, and they covered topics or across the span of all conversations. They
yeah,
covered it all, and they made you think. And musically, unparalleled. They
yeah,
were on. They are at the top of their game with anybody.
yeah.
Um, and as somebody who plays the guitar a little bit, Alex Lifeson is not my favorite guitar player either. There's lots of reasons for me not to like this band, but the genius of who they were because of what they were saying, they put behind it, pushed them. They were never a huge success of a band, but everybody knows how awesome they are, and that made them successful.
Well,
They never. Go ahead.
Neil Neil Peart was not only their drummer, but he was their lyricist,
Yes,
and he came up with songs that he knew Geddy would be able to absolutely slay.
sure,
I love that.
absolutely. There's and like I said, they have some songs that are awesome, but it's because of what they were saying, um, how well they were saying it that wrote it, and not like Alex Lifeson, not like Alex Lifeson. You cannot deny his own signature on that band, and Neil Peart's signature on that band,
True.
and Eddie Van Halen. Where would the rock world be without a guitarist that was able to speak the way he did through his music? He was never the front man, but he was the co-front man because
Yeah.
everybody loved Eddie. All
Yes,
he had to do was smile and play his guitar,
that
and
is true.
people loved him.
That is
A-
true. I mean, and
And
how incredible of a guitarist is he that he's just like, kind of bored. I need a new project. Michael Jackson asks him to do the solo work, and he does it for free.
I actually watched a snippet of that, him doing an interview talking about that, and the host of the show asked him, "So, how did this come about?" And Eddie goes, "Well, the band had an agreement that we never did anything outside of Van Halen. We just didn't." He said the other guys were out of town, and I didn't have anybody to ask, so I said, "Why not? It's not like anybody will know that I did the song. I'll help out this young black kid." And it was hysterical because he never really thought it was going to be that big a deal, and
And it's
hearing of
huge.
his one of
And
the biggest albums of all time.
it's huge, and it's so Eddie. You can
Oh
so
yeah,
tell him.
yes, very much so. And his legacy has influenced millions of guitarists.
Yeah.
Maybe millions is a little bit of exaggeration, but I mean, every guitarist in the last 30 years has some Eddie Van Halen in them.
Yep.
And that is, a tribute to absolutely things he said. And one of my favorite guitarists from the 80s, quite frankly, laid it down, said Eddie Van Halen was one of my biggest influences, Reb Beach from Winger,
Oh
who
yeah.
is also a tremendous vocal voice on
Yeah.
his guitar in that band.
Yeah.
Headed for a Heartbreak is one of the best guitar parts I think that came out during that generation because that guitar sings its own parts of that song,
Yes.
and you feel the solo and the cries of desperation and despair and everything else like that. And that's what the guitar can do that rock bands have gotten away from. It's not just about a hook and a riff. It's about speaking with a voice about the things that matter the most to you. And it doesn't have to be just what's lyrically written, but it's what is the guitar saying. And we've so gotten away from that. And
Right.
that's kind of frustrating. So to answer your question, that's what I would see. I would want to see rock bands go back to using their instruments,
Uh,
as they are.
right.
Um, how about yourself? Same question back to you.
What I would like to see in rock and roll is a little less overproduction. I would like the instruments, I don't want 9-minute guitar solos, but I would like, a heavier, grittier sound in some of these, not so heavy that, you get annoyed by the guitar, but yeah, something a little bit like that. And also just the suggestion, I'm going to throw this out in the universe and you can take it for whatever it is, but it would be really cool if the sons of all of the Beatles created a band. So let's go, James McCartney. Let's go, Sean Lennon, or maybe Julian. Take your pick.
Sure.
Danny Harrison and Zach Starkey. Let's go, boys. It'd be cool.
It would be cool. That would be cool.
Sons of the Beatles or Beatles,
Sure.
whatever. Let's go.
Well, it's funny. Financially, none of them have to.
No,
So-
that's what would make it so great.
Yeah,
Because
that would be pretty cool.
for fun and do it for themselves. I mean, there's an era in the Beatles that they stopped making pop music. They stopped being a boy band because they started creating music for themselves, the music that they wanted to write, the music that came from their hearts, not, I want to hold your hand. I mean, okay, let's be real. That it got them where they were at the point and gave them the ability to do what they wanted to do and create music how they wanted to create it. But by and large, I mean, everything after like Rubber Soul, just fantastic in its own realm. And the
Right.
beat, I mean, they had this beautiful vocal harmonious sound no matter what they were singing in that decade they were together, only a decade.
Right.
But then they were able to expand that with these different sounds. I mean, let's talk a little bit about Sgt. Pepper's or the White Album. I mean, there's different
Sure.
sounds and techniques and things like that, and I would say that it wasn't overproduced. It was just
Sure. And to go back to what we were talking about earlier about bands, not being what we expect them to be, because there's a little unfairness in there because it's their music. Whatever they want it to be is what they want it to be.
yeah.
But for the most part, it's the first few albums that come out from a band that causes a fan base to love them.
True.
And I'll keep going back to Def Leppard because they're one of my favorite bands. Their first two albums were very raw. On Through the Night was a very freshman album, good album, with some great songs. High and Dry comes out, and you still have this. Now they've harnessed this raw, gritty sound that they had, and it is a fantastic album. And then once again, Mutt Lange gets his hands on it and produces Pyromania, which was the beauty, all the power of that raw energy coupled with some great production, and it was a natural evolution. Therefore, for when Hysteria came out, it wasn't Pyromania; it was the next step and a very important step. And
Yeah.
and they got away, and then they kept trying to recreate the magic of Hysteria, in my opinion, after that, and they just never could quite capture it. And so you got to expect bands to grow and to change and develop out.
Yeah.
Chris Cornell was he wrote, actually, Audio Slave wrote a song, Regional Fire. The Original Fire is died and gone, but the riot inside lives on. They don't always have that same grit anymore. They've lost it, but that the need to write and the feelings of writing are still there. So
another band that does that is famous for that is U2.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Everything prior to the Joshua Tree was very new, original, that had kind of like a punk-ish sound. And then the Joshua Tree came out, and now everybody's expecting more Joshua Tree. Guys, stop asking, stop waiting for it, because Joshua Tree is the Joshua Tree. You're not going to get one. You're going to get other sounds from them, because they do, once again, write for themselves. Bono has listened to Brian Eno when Brian Eno was telling him, stop focusing on trying to be cool. That's the coolness about U2, is that they're trying not to be cool. They're just being U2.
Sure.
And those were wise words by Brian, one of their producers that they have used off and on for many, many years. And they continue to surprise me. This last album that they have put out, it's called Songs of Surrender. And by and large, it was all remakes of their previous work. So 40 songs, it's a double album, 40 songs that they have already released. But they've just kind of reworked them. And they have decided to, Bono has repenned them in an older voice, a more mature voice. And so it's really interesting. It's interesting to hear. Speaking of U2 news, this week, it was last weekend, pop-up show under the canopy of Fremont Street.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not hear that.
The band came in on a tractor trailer, on a flatbed trailer, and they came in and they have a brand new song called Atomic City. And by the hundreds of people that were in the audience, completely shocked once they kind of figured out what was happening, they all pulled their phones out and they were recording this song and they've uploaded it to YouTube. Bono has described this song as a early 70s soft punk song, and I dig it. I love it. But I have a hard time hating anything that U2 puts out. But it's good.
I had a friend, Kelly, who lived growing up in Southern California his whole life. Remembers quite clearly when they did Where the Streets Have No Names, and they shot that on that rooftop in downtown Los Angeles.
Yes.
That was they did so without permit, without asking anybody, and it causes it caused this huge traffic jams and crowds and the whole 9 yards for people who, when they finally heard what was going on, all of course rushed downtown to see U2. And so they have a history of doing a little bit like this. But that's awesome. Talk about a band that has come so far, didn't lose itself, stayed friends, and tried not to, the ego isn't there.
Yeah, the very same lineup. I mean, let's see, how many years has it been now? Oh gosh, do my math here.
40 since War came out.
46 years
Wow.
since the inception of the band.
Wow.
And this is still the same lineup. Now, what was really cool about the little pop-up show on the flatbed trailer was that Larry Mullen Jr. was at the kit. So this is huge. Wow. This is huge because Larry is not medically capable of performing during their residency in Las Vegas, because that residency is going to go for a few months over the fall of this year. They plan on taking that tour out into the rest of the world. So hopefully Larry will be able to join them then. But by and large, their residency, he's not going to be able to because he's medically out. But for this one-off, Larry was able to join them from his drum kit, and it was so cool.
That's pretty cool.
It gave me chills.
Wow. So lots of things to hope for, right? Lots of things to hope for. Things we can hopefully have maybe a little voice and hopefully instigate some change out there. The music industry, the music business has always been a business, and they look out for whatever that bottom dollar is. But hopefully, we find some new artists and some new sounds and some new ideas that kind of get things rolling again. We talked about before, rock and roll is not dead.
Nope.
Rock and roll is. It will always be, and it always comes back. It always comes back home. It always comes back to center. But we need to help them find it, I think. So, listen to some new music. Go out and do some YouTube searching. Find out what's popular, what's new and upcoming, and find something you can hold on to.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite. Well, it's kind of a catchphrase of mine lately. It's you know, an important place to keep music in your ears, but you better be keeping it in your heart as well.
Amen to that. And that's probably a great spot to end. Remember, folks, if you like the little show, please hit the the subscribe button, and share us with a friend. Other than that, we'll talk to you next time. Keep rocking.
Woohoo!